So I'd like to first of all introduce to you Kathy Dewick, and Kathy is from the Pathways to Stewardship and Kinship program in Peterborough. We would like to welcome you.
Thank you. Well, I'm very glad to spend some time with all of you on this Earth Day. And I'd like to tell you that there are going to be two sections to this workshop. We're going to start indoors, and I have a few slides to show you. And then I'm hoping that you will go outside and do some exploration in your schoolyard. Now, the Pathway project that I'm working with represents quite a big number of organizations in the Peterborough area. And we have a whole lot of people who are working together, thinking about how we can improve the world around us and working towards a world that's maybe a little kinder and a little healthier, both for people and for the many other kinds of living things that we share our world with. And sometimes the best place to start is just to look around us and to see what we can do in our own lives, in our own yards, in our own homes, our own schoolyards. So today we're going to be talking about schoolyards. And um, I've put together a schoolyard report card. Now, I know that you probably all get a report card a few times a year where you're graded on different aspects of your time at school. And we're going to do something similar for your schoolyard and look at how you might score your school as a habitat for people, looking at your schoolyard's environmental health and how your schoolyard might score as a habitat for wildlife. So before we send you out to do that, and I hope your teachers have been able to find the schoolyard score sheet. It should be in the Google Classroom for this session. If not, I'll give you my email address at the end of this session, and I'm glad to send it to you. So I'm going to share my screen now, and I hope you can all see that. Can you all see the slide? Fairly typical kind of front of a school with a flag. And I'm going to show you a few images today to just to get you thinking about schoolyards, what we have, what we maybe could have in the future, and just to spark your imagination. So I'd like to start by asking you all to think about your schoolyard as it is now. And I wonder how much you can remember. I'm assuming probably you're sitting indoors, and I'm wondering how much you can remember about what your schoolyard looks like. And if you happen to have a piece of paper and a pencil or pen handy, I would invite you to start working on a sketch of your schoolyard, whatever you can remember. If you were flying over your schoolyard, imagine that you're a drone taking pictures over your schoolyard. Are there lots of playing fields? Are there places where people meet and talk? Is there an outdoor shelter? And I encourage you, if you can sketch and listen at the same time, I encourage you to work on a sketch of your schoolyard while we talk for a few minutes together and I show you a few slides. So the first thing to think about is, what do we all think a schoolyard is for? Now, for a long time, pretty much everybody thought that schoolyards were places for running and places for sports fields, and that's great. It's really important. I'm sure you all know that being physically active is a very important part of being healthy. And most schoolyards were very flat. If they ever had hills in them, they were usually bulldozed to be flat. Of course, that makes it a little more suitable for a playing field. Sometimes they're green. It's great if you're playing soccer on a grassy area rather than on bare soil. And very often, schoolyards have a lot of pavement. So that's pretty typical of what schoolyards have been for a long time. And I'm wondering, is there a soccer field in your schoolyard? I know a lot of you probably love to play soccer, really popular sport. Is there a baseball diamond in your schoolyard? I'm sure a lot of you love to play baseball. We're getting into that season. And these kinds of sports areas are great and really important to have. But not all kids are the same. Many kids love to play sports. Many kids like to do different things outdoors. And I'm wondering if there are any different things other than playing sports that you enjoy doing outdoors in your free time. So, are you the kind of person who loves to sit under some trees and sketch or read or just sit and think? Are you the kind of person who loves to explore? This is a schoolyard where the students and the teachers have worked together and they've planted lots of gardens and created all sorts of interesting pathways and things to look at outdoors. And this is a school where there are younger grades. Now, I know that you're all in grades 7 or 8, but I'm wondering if your school has younger grades in it as well. And many of the younger kids love to build things. And in this schoolyard, they've brought in lots of bales of straw that can be used to stack up. And there's boards, and you can see that they're rolling something around from one student to the other. There's kids that are climbing underneath. So there's lots of things to interact with in this schoolyard. And for some kids, they love to do that. Now, in this schoolyard, they let the kids take chalk outside at recess and they can draw things on pavement. So it's another creative thing that can happen in your schoolyard. And many students, and especially once you start to get up to grade 7 and 8 and into secondary school, one of your favorite things to do might be visiting with your friends. And is there a comfortable place that you can all get together and visit and talk outdoors? So those are a few ideas of things that might be good for people to do outside. But I wonder if you think that schoolyards are only people. And I wonder if your school has any habitat for wildlife in the schoolyard. Now, you may know that many kinds of wildlife, um, many types of birds, for example, many kinds of insects like bees, their populations are declining really drastically, largely because of loss of habitat. And I'm sure in your earlier grades, you studied about habitat and the different components of habitat. So, is there any opportunity to welcome wildlife into your schoolyard? How could that happen? Now, this particular picture I was standing facing a playing field, and this was taken about 10 years ago. And when I turned and faced in the opposite direction, this is the same schoolyard, and they built a habitat area in the corner of their schoolyard, and they all worked together um, to plant trees. They planted shrubs, they built nest boxes, they brought in rocks, and they built brush piles for places for animals to hide and safe places for them to raise their young. And they thought they'd really like to share their schoolyard with other kinds of living things. And especially today on Earth Day, I think it's more important than ever to start thinking about sharing our spaces with other kinds of living things. And this is the same schoolyard, and it took them quite a few years to develop this wonderful area. They also built some pathways. They built a butterfly garden. You can see there's a bird bath there. I think they also worked on some schoolyard food gardens, and each class could grow whatever they wanted in terms of vegetables. So it took a long time. They didn't do this all at once, but it took a lot of teamwork and a lot of people talking and sharing ideas. So I would like to show you a few pictures of what some other schools have done in their schoolyards, just to give you some ideas to spark your imagination. Because some of the best changes that have happened in the world have happened because people used their imaginations to think of how can we make the world a better place. So this is just a few ideas to think about, and and think about which of these ideas you like or that might work in your schoolyard. So this was a school this is in the city of Peterborough, where they had a very wet area in the schoolyard. It was always a problem whenever it rained. It would just get really mucky, and kids trying to play their sports outside, they're getting their shoes full of mud. And so they all got together and they talked about this, and they thought, well, how can we solve this problem? We don't really need that area for a sports field. So what would happen if we dug out some of the soil in that wet area? And they actually made a little wetland. It wasn't very deep, it was just a few inches deep. And one of the teachers loved to do carpentry at this school. And so he worked with some of the senior students, and look at the beautiful bridge that they built. Just amazing. Like they were so proud of this. And they worked with people in the local gardening clubs, and they developed a vegetable garden and quite a number of wildlife gardens. And it was something that the whole school got involved with. And now, quite a few years later, the little trees that they planted are gigantic, and this is a beautiful forest now, and one of the things that this school is proudest about. So here are a few other ideas. On the left, this is actually a school in downtown Toronto, where they decided that they would like to build a pollinator garden. Now, you may have heard that many bees are in trouble because there just aren't enough flowers for them to gather nectar from. And certainly we rely on bees to pollinate many of the foods that we love to eat. All of our fruits, we can thank the bees for pollinating those, and many other vegetables. So they worked together with some of their parents who love to garden, and they built a pollinator garden. And on the right-hand side, the students were feeling like they would like to spend more time outside, even during doing their regular classroom studies outside. And so again, they worked with some parents. There were parents that were professional builders, and they designed an outdoor classroom with a roof so that they could work outside even if it was raining. And they also built a bunch of benches so that there's a place to sit. Now, this is a schoolyard that had a really big paved area. And when there was a heavy rain, so much of the rain flowed right off of the pavement, and the sports field in the back would get just soggy wet, and made it really difficult to play their sports out there. So again, they worked with school maintenance department and parents, and they decided to remove a big area of pavement. And instead of pavement, they brought in some mulch. This brown is shredded bark and wood chips. And when the pavement was gone, then the rain would seep into the ground when it rained, rather than all running off into the playing field. So they solved a problem with the water runoff, but they also created some really interesting spaces. They planted trees, they planted shrubs, they installed places for kids to sit. So there's more variety in the schoolyard now. So it's environmentally healthier, and a more interesting place for the students. Now, this school started with a very flat, pretty boring schoolyard. Now, this is a big project, so this would take a lot of people working together, but they had parents who were landscape architects. That's people who specialize in designing and building beautiful outdoor spaces. They actually created a hill here where it had been very flat, so more interesting, places to run up and down, and planted quite a number of big trees. And you can see it looks like garbage bags at the bottom here, at the base of the trees, but those are tree watering bags. And they're bags that if you have a hose, you can fill the bag up with water, and there are little tiny holes in the bottom, and the water really slowly seeps out and gives the trees a really good drink right down to the base of their roots. And in addition to that, you can see, there are some younger kids at this school, but they built a little sort of make-believe kitchen here with a table and places to sit. So kids can make mud pies and places for make-believe, which is really important too. Now, this school had just a very hot, bare yard in one corner of the schoolyard, and you can see that they've created a beautiful space here. This would take heavy equipment, but parents who had access to some bulldozers and could bring in some giant rocks, and they planted some big trees. And there were kids at this school who were using wheelchairs, so they built kind of a boardwalk here with boards so that kids in wheelchairs could still access the trails. They could roll along the trails. So just a different kind of a space, lots of variety. And of course, for the birds, there'd be lots of places for birds' nests. I'm sure the birds were grateful. Now, this is another simple idea. I don't know if any of you have parents who are foresters or arborists. Those are people who work with trees. But this school had a number of cut sections from trees that were delivered to the schoolyard, which created lots of seating space. And especially the younger kids, they could still, if they could still pick these pieces up, they could stack them up into whatever kind of space they wanted. So it made the schoolyard more interesting and more interactive. Now, in this particular school, there were lots of people who loved to garden, but they didn't have any space to garden in the school. So they decided that they would like to build, we call these raised beds. So they're growing spaces that are raised up above the ground. And again, if there are kids in wheelchairs, they can reach the growing spaces so they can participate as well. And in this school, they grew a variety of vegetables, flowers, plants that would support butterflies and different kinds of pollinators, food plants for people, and they would do a lot of their classes outdoors. So this is another shot of a schoolyard that was completely paved. This school didn't have any green spaces at all. And they created kind of a quiet corner here, a green corner. Some of the pavement was removed so they could plant some trees. You can see there's some really nice benches here, that a good place to sit and talk to your friends. And over here, there's some garden space. And I don't know what they're growing, but it's a very beautiful addition to their schoolyard. Now, in this school, the kids got together and designed a mural that was painted on the outside of their school to make it a little more interesting and kid-friendly. And they wanted to have some trees. You can see there's a lot of pavement in this school as well. So they removed the pavement in an area under this tree and planted some shrubs. And because tree roots don't like to have the soil pounded down by a lot of people walking over the tree roots, they made a little fence around there just so that the kids could keep their running on the paved area and let the tree grow so that eventually there'd be beautiful shade. And especially as kids are getting older, like you folks are, and it's more and more important to have places to visit, comfortable places to visit with your friends. This is what another school did. This is beside the play equipment, nice green area here where kids can meet and sit and chat. And one last picture that I'd like to show you. This is another school that decided to create a hill. You can see the little hill in the background here. And they built a slide into the side of the hill so nobody can fall off the back of the slide and hurt themselves. You just fall onto the hill if you fall over the edge. And once again, lots of trees to provide some shade for those hot days. For some of the littler kids, here's an empty or a hollow log that they can climb through. There's another shade structure here with places to sit. Yeah, there's a blackboard outside so that kids can draw. So there's a few things to think about. And these are all big projects, and I don't want to overwhelm anyone today. Just want you to use your imagination and think about what your schoolyard could be. Maybe 20 years from now, what could it be? And where could you start? So it's great to start by looking at what you have now, and making a map is a really good way to start. And you folks are probably pretty good at using the internet, and you can look at Google Maps, look for the satellite images, just put your school's name and address, and you can probably get a map, a satellite image of your schoolyard, which can be a good place to start drawing in what you have and what you might like to see ideally. It's great to talk with each other about the things that you like about your schoolyard as it is now, and if there's anything that you like to change, and can you agree? Can you make some decisions? So talking and sharing ideas is always a great way to start. And you might put those ideas down into a plan. And once again, a map is a great way to show ideas of what the landscape could be. And in many of these other schools, they started by sharing their ideas with parents. You might have a parent council at your school. You're talking to their principal, talking to the school neighbors, and very often, when the adults know that the kids are really excited about something, they want to help, and they can be a big help. So it's really important, if you think about starting some kind of a schoolyard project, to take one step at a time. Now, I know everybody's pretty tired after 2 years of COVID and lots of online learning, so it's great to start small. And there might be something really simple that you can do, that you can start this year. Might be as simple as growing a few wildflowers, things like black-eyed Susan, and finding a place in your schoolyard, maybe along the fence, where you can plant them for pollinators. One of the classes that we met with this morning had been building birdhouses this week. So lots of things that you could do. And take time to celebrate and enjoy whatever you do decide to do. So that's probably enough indoor time, and I'd like to encourage you to go outside with the time that you have left this afternoon. And if you've been working on a map of your schoolyard from your memory, you might finish that before you go outdoors and compare what you remembered with what is actually outside when you go outside and have a look at your schoolyard. And as I mentioned, pulling up a base map from a satellite image from Google Maps can give you a good place to start. And if you can find the schoolyard scorecard after you've put together a map, then I encourage you to walk through the report card and see how your schoolyard would rate and what kind of suggestions you have for changes. And this is my email address. I would encourage your teachers. I'd love to keep in touch with you. I'd love your feedback on the Schoolyard report card. And if you do anything as far as making a schoolyard plan this year, I'd love to hear about it.